Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are looking at demand. So before we look into demand, and then our next video will be about supply, we're going to firstly discuss briefly what is a market. And simply, it is a meeting of buyers and sellers. So it's where buyers and sellers come together to trade. So that could be in a store. So here we've got a checkout. It could be something like the stock market. This is, I think, the New York Stock Exchange, where people are buying and selling shares in a company. This here, got a couple of phones and a shopping basket on top. It's supposed to represent online shopping. So buyers and sellers don't have to meet in a physical space. Still a market. You buy something online, still participating in a market. And also the market doesn't have to be legal as well. So this is supposed to represent illegal activity, so something like a drug deal perhaps. Still a market. The market for drugs is quite a fascinating market to look at. Still a market, despite it being illegal. Okay, definition. We'll always have a definition. Different quantities of goods and services that consumers are willing and able to buy at different prices. Now, keywords here, willing and able, they're in bold because they're important. So you need to have satisfied both to actually be demanding something. So for example, Chicago White Sox, they're a baseball team, they're my favorite team. I follow them very closely. I would be willing to buy the Chicago White Sox and be the owner. I think that would be fun. But I'm not able to do that because that costs $2 to $3 billion. I don't have that. I'm only a teacher. So I'm not demanding the Chicago White Sox. You also have to be willing. So this is a protester, back during the pandemic, people not wanting to wear a mask because that's the most terrible thing that could happen. Trump voter, there we go. This lady here, she is able to buy a mask, right? They don't cost much. They cost almost nothing. But she's not willing to buy a mask. So therefore, she's not demanding one. So it doesn't count unless you're both willing and able. Okay. This is a really simple concept, which I'm sure you already understand intuitively. But we call it the law of demand. So as price falls, quantity demanded rises. Right, people buy more of stuff if it is cheaper. As price rises, quantity demanded falls. Right, so they've got an inverse relationship with each other. I actually made this GIF myself. I was proud of it at the time. Okay, this is our next model, our demand supply model. At the moment, we're just focusing on demand. This is what it looks like. We've got price on the y-axis, quantity on the x-axis. And we've got all the different levels of demand that we would have at different prices. So at a high price up here, I have less demand, right? Law of demand. At a low price, we have more. We've got greater quantity demanded. Again, law of demand. So this is demand curve will always be sloping downwards. And when we're just showing it conceptually, we just draw it like this at a 45-degree angle. It's simple. Sorry, that's my dog whining because I think my wife just got home and she whines at the door when she comes home. Okay, what we're going to look at here, non-price determinants of demand. So these are things that will change the amount of demand because remember, economies change, markets change. So we're going to see what changes demand. So we've got a list here. I've put them in a little mnemonic device so that it can help us remember them hopefully. So remember the word ripen, that we can help remember what these non-price determinants are. So we'll go through each in a bit of depth, but they are related goods, income, preferences and tastes, expectations of future price, and the number of consumers. So they make that word ripen, which hopefully helps us remember what these are. Okay, let's, really important for beginners to economics, got to recognize that price does not shift the demand curve. So demand doesn't increase when the price comes down, right? we'll go over that a lot, don't worry. Okay, related goods. So there's two types of related goods. One are substitutes. So the demand curve can be affected by the change in price of another good. I just said price, not a changer, but this is the price of a different good, right? So substitute goods, similar benefits, they're used in place of one another. I'll give us an example here. Coke and Pepsi. People have a strong preference either way. Some people like Pepsi, some people are normal. Anyway, if the price of Pepsi increases, what that's going to do is it's going to increase the demand for Coke, right? Because people who like Pepsi, they'll be like, oh, it's just getting a bit too expensive. Maybe I'll just buy this other thing instead. Same work the other way around. If Coke becomes cheaper, some people, that'll decrease people's demand for Pepsi because they will shift their consumption to Coke. So lots of examples of substitute goods working in this way. You'll be able to think of lots yourself. Complementary goods or complements, they're two goods that tend to be used together. So the price of the other one will change the demand, can change the demand. Here we've got printers and printer ink. So if, for example, I don't have a printer at home, so I get to use one at school, but also partly because printer ink was really expensive. So if the price of printer ink came down, that would increase my demand for having a printer at home, right? Because the total cost of printing is the two things together. It's not just buying the printer, it's the two things together, really. So it will affect the demand. Again, so many examples of these. We'll go through plenty in class. Okay, income. There's also two types of goods when it comes to income. So there's normal goods, those whose demand increases when consumer incomes rise and decrease when incomes fall. So for example, these are a couple of normal goods. Takeaway coffee and a new car, right? As our incomes increase, we buy more of these things. We've seen that over the years. The amount of takeaway coffee that is bought is ridiculous in Australia. That's because incomes have risen and people want these things as their incomes rise. They're a luxury, sort of. Same with new cars. If your income rises, you're more likely to buy a new car, right? It's obvious. What's interesting, I think, more interesting, is the inferior goods. Those are goods whose demand decreases when income rises. So things that goods that aren't as good. So an example of this is your minced meat. So if you go to Coles or Woolworths, you've got sort of like 3 different tiers of meat. You've got like the regular mince, then you've got the high grade, the medium grade mince, and the high grade, or it might be 5-star or whatever. When I was poor, living with my girlfriend in a little unit, both studying, didn't have much money, we bought regular mince when we were making things like spaghetti. Now we've both got much higher incomes. We don't skimp on mince. We go to the premium mince. So as our incomes increased, our demand for regular mince fell. Okay, preferences and tastes. This is a big one. Demand curve can be affected by a change in tastes and preferences of consumers. Right, so advertising is designed to change our preferences and tastes, designed to make us think, oh, I want to smell like a man, I'm going to have Old Spice. So back in the day, this was a very successful commercial, and it made people prefer that product over other similar ones. I've also got trends. So preferences are changing, but it's not due to advertising. It's just due to peer pressure and fashion and whatnot. So, for example, I've noticed a big increase in people wearing false eyelashes. It's a bit of a trend. This one comes and goes. The top knot for men. So that will increase the demand for hair bands, hair ties when that comes in. And these things, fidget spinners, I've noticed in my kids' primary school, they sort of come and go in popularity. So if there's a trend, there's an increase in demand, and then people just stop buying them for a while. And there can also be new information. So a couple of examples here. Masks, when we got new information that A, we had to wear them, but also B, that if we wore them, it would protect us from getting COVID. Increase in demand. These Nana's frozen berries. This was about 10 years ago, where they were found that people who were eating these were getting hepatitis A. And it was because some of these berries were grown in China, and they were grown in fields where they used human feces as fertilizer, which is can make you sick. Don't touch the stuff. Okay, expectations of future price. This is the E. So future expectations of price can shift demand. We've got a few examples here. If it's mid-December and you're buying something, it's not a gift for anyone, you just want it, what you might do is you might hold off because you've got an expectation that price will come down. So that'll decrease your demand. It's not the change in price itself, it's the expectation of that change in price. Houses. Part of the reason we've got this big housing bubble, housing crisis at the moment, is because people see the prices go up. And what they want to do is they want to buy now before the price goes up further. So they expect the price to go up, which makes you more demanding of buying a house now. And last one, this is an interesting one. This is tulips. There was a tulip mania in the Netherlands in, I think, the 17th century. People became enamored with tulips, and they became almost an investment. People would buy them knowing that they were going to go up in value, and they could sell them for a profit. Until, this is what we call a bubble, until one day this bubble burst, and people who had spent thousands of dollars or whatever their currency was on tulips were left with these worthless things that they'd spent so much money on. You could argue that something like cryptocurrency is very similar. Okay, a number of consumers in a market. So the change in market size will affect demand. So we've had a lot of immigration into Australia, 2023. These people need to live somewhere. That affects the demand for housing. So it's supposed to look like an auction, I guess. It's also the demographics of an area. So if you've got a lot of young people or young families, that's the market for early learning, childcare. So if you have a lot of young families in an area, you've got a lot of demand for early learning. And if you have a lot of old people in an area, you've got a lot of demand for elderly care, aged care. Okay, explaining a shift. There's specific terminology we want to use here. So this would be a good way of doing it. Due to an increase in consumer income, so we want to refer to our non-price determinant. Demand for takeaway coffees increases from D to D1. So we're saying what happens, it's an increase, and we're referring to our diagram, D1. D standing for demand, obviously. And lastly, a bit of terminology that we use, and I'm going to come down on this pretty hard in our practice in class. When the demand curve shifts, it is an increase in demand or a decrease in demand. When it's just price changing, when price increases, it is a contraction in demand. If we say decrease in demand, it gets confusing with a shift of the curve. So we say contraction, so demand shrinks, sort of. And when price decreases, it's an expansion, again, to differentiate between an increase in demand due to a non-price determinant, a shift of the curve, and one that's just due to price. Okay, got a lot of practice to do in class. We'll get there. Thank you.